Our flag is in the back. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming. Thank all your guests out there for coming and joining the library. Start today with reports. Dr. Malone.
Thank you, Aaron. I want to start off visiting a little bit about goals for the 14-15 school year. And these are attached to your board agenda. I thought first, as a preface, we'd take a look at 13-14 goals, just as a review of where we've been in the past. You'd have a chance to look at those. The board goals were that 90% of high school seniors will apply to a post-secondary institution or the military. That was completed with 93%. The school district will achieve a fund balance of 8% of the unassigned general fund by fiscal year 23. That's in progress. The fiscal year 14 budget includes an unassigned general fund budget to be 3.1% in comparison to 2.4% for last year. Then taking a look at executive council goals for last year, that PLCs will be a professional development model in which teachers work collaboratively and autonomously with the 4 questions and the instructional framework to build teacher capacity and increase student learning. And that was achieved. The PLCs have become more productive as teachers better understand the process and the expectations. The student success goal was the same as the board goals. There was a goal to inform teachers about the new testing schedules, the test results, and the overview of new testing requirements. That goal was met. Training teachers for data analysis on Explore, Plan, and ACT. That goal was met. Consult best practice to develop a social and emotional well-being program. And that was accomplished through grief groups, through the SAVE presentation and curriculum, the Healthy Community event, anxiety support group, partnerships with area mental health agencies. There was a MDE, psychological first aid provided to the high school staff. MDE All Hazards Framework for administrators and mental health team. The We Care Club was started at the high school. The track group, Together Reaching Area Kids, was formed, community-based kids, to foster a safe and healthy environment for the Becker community by promoting mental health and resiliency. And then developing a scope and sequence for social emotional well-being. So that's just an overview of the board and executive council goals from last year. As we take a look at this year, I'd ask you first to pull up the document called FY15 Planning.
I'm sorry, Steve, before we leave the last year's stuff. So we have this goal of 90% of high school seniors to apply. Is there something in place, or how will we know if that should be something that kind of continues to carry forward, correct?
It will, yes.
Okay. So we have something in place to know that we're not going to lose that going on an ongoing basis.
We do. That's something that we're tracking.
Okay. Thank you.
There's a document called Board Goals Template, FY15.pdf. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention because on the second school board goal, which in the column on your left, an additional 10% of ELOs will be supported by technology at the modification or redefinition level on the SAMR scale. This will be completed at the end of the 14-15 school year. And then under school board progress indicator, the superintendent will report the number of ELOs supported at the modification or redefinition level on the SAMR scale to the board no later than August of 14. So in that regard, there are 1,317 ELOs in the district that we've identified. 96 of them are currently at the modification or redefinition level. So 10% of the 96 would be an additional 10. So in terms of the board goal, I just wanted to point that out. before I bring up the next goal form, which in your packet is called the 14-15 Goals Form. And on the top there, you will recognize the school board goals for 14-15, which you approved last December. The first one is in the area of academic standards, that students in grade 1 will exceed the national mean growth target for reading and math by 5 RIT points from fall 14 to spring 15. Students in grade 2 will exceed the national mean growth target for reading and math by 3 RIT points from fall 14 to spring 15. And MCA proficiency for grades 3, 10, and 11, tested in the spring of 15, will increase by 4% in comparison to the previous year. The technology goal I read to you in the other document, and then we have the ongoing financial goal of reaching 8% of our unassigned fund balance by the year 23. The next area talks about the executive council goals for 14-15. Academic standards are exactly the same as the school board goals. In technology, we're planning to add an additional 10 ELOs per school, or 40 total. So that would be 4 times what the goal would specify as a minimum that we would be identifying at the modification or the redefinition level. Superintendent's Cabinet will be meeting tomorrow, and we'll be talking about goals then, so I can forward those to you when we have those finished. One change from previous years is not all staff members will be using this form that you're looking at to set their goals. And the reason for that is in the new teacher evaluation system, staff members set their goals within that digital environment, and they also set, or building goals, I should say, are set by the principals that will be within that teacher evaluation. So some staff members will use this form, but teachers will not. So just to bring that to your attention. Questions or comments about goals? Staff development schedule is underway. We'll finish that up next week. This fall, we'll be focusing on the new teacher evaluation system, on PLCs, the district instructional framework, data review, and response to intervention. And I'll get that out to board members next week when it goes out to the staff. And then just a note in the consent agenda for the June minutes. When we approved the minutes in June, we had a statement about the bus lease including Sovereign Bank. In fact, Hoagland is now working independently and is not working with Sovereign Bank, so the June minutes are attached as an amendment, and it just deletes Sovereign Bank from the minutes. So that's on the consent agenda. That's all I have to report. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Moving on to committee reports. Start with individual contract. Mr. Kinder, I believe you have an update on that.
I do. You'll see in the consent agenda that we have 3 additional contracts that have been settled with the activities director, transportation director, and network manager. All 3 of those contracts meet the goal of 2% per year average set by this team to continue to support the financial health of the district. We are still working with the district office staff.
What number are you?
5. And director of buildings and grounds. So we're in zone.
Thank you. Moving on to certified negotiations, and I believe that's you.
I actually have one question on, just on the activities director, the medical reimbursement. We see that it was there in 2013-14 and then it's gone. What exactly was that?
Medical reimbursement is a benefit in some contracts whereby employees are reimbursed for qualified medical expenses. And in this case, the individual chose not to take that benefit any longer.
Any questions or discussion? Certified negotiations, Mr. Olson.
Sure. Well, we have had some discussions, kind of informal discussions between committees away from the table, and we have agreed to have another meeting with the committee without the mediator present, and that is coming up this Thursday. And that meeting will be by decree of the mediator, that will be closed to the public. That meeting starts at 6:30, and we've had some good dialogue, and we're optimistic that we can move forward and get the contract settled. And I think everyone is aware, just worthy of restating that, we can settle a 4-year two 2-year contracts now because we're past that deadline, and looks like very likely that's the direction we're headed. And you're all aware that we have a closed session tonight, and we'll be reconvening for further discussion around that. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Thank you, Brian. And a construction update.
And construction committee met this morning. Brian and I were both present, as well as the rest of the committee members. We talked about, we've now taken possession of the pool, and all inspections have been completed. They started swimming in the pool as of this morning for the school activities. So it's all positive, and things are moving on schedule. We have, just finish up adjustments as we continue to come to the close of the work, the major work, just getting all of that stuff done. So we'll be taking possession of the auditorium sometime mid-August, and the other close-up work, the asphalt and everything finishing up. And we're going to finish up with the tour tonight as well for the board members. The one item that's on the agenda for us tonight is the signage to approve that contract bid. The bid went out, and we received some pretty competitive bids, and we'll actually be under budget for that item. So everything else is on track.
Right, and overall, we are within budget on this project. And there's been a few bumps here and there, but for a project of this magnitude, I think it's gone very well. Everyone involved has done a very nice job. The sign committee did a very good job. I think we saw that layout today. Really looks good. One, you won't see this in, I don't think it's in the packet, but kind of a neat feature is there will actually be on the entrance coming in from Hancock between the primary and intermediate area. They know that main entrance that comes in where the tennis courts used to be. There will actually be a kind of a directory where you can pull off the main drive. It'll be lit. You can go up there, and someone that's not familiar with the campus can actually pull up out of the traffic lane and take a look and where am I, and you are here, and that sort of thing. It's really a nice feature that should be very friendly for visitors.
And that same, there's that kind of break in the sidewalk that a lot of people have been using as a driveway. It's not really a driveway, and there'll be a directory in that spot too. So some of the main areas that people will be pulling up to.
That one right in front.
Yeah.
And I see that they fixed the curb in the parking lot. And
That's
they
in
were working on the
process.
sidewalk. They were working on the sidewalk. Any questions for the construction committee? All right, thank you guys. Moving on to consent agenda.
This is the point of the meeting when they sing stuff.
Should be good now.
Moving on to item 3, consent agenda.
I would move approval on those items.
I'll second.
Any discussion? I have a motion by Olson to accept the consent agenda, seconded by Molis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item number 4, first reading, we have 2 policies here, 521 and 709. Dr. Malone, I'll just let you talk to those a little bit.
Thanks, Aaron. Policy 521, student disability non-discrimination. That clarifies that the ADA coordinator is also the 504 coordinator. So that's the change there. Transportation safety policy, we have not updated in some time. The primary changes are in regard to requirements and duties for bus drivers on page 6, requiring bus drivers to report the specified moving violations and other criminal activities to the employer within the specified number of days. Also, new language surrounding training for bus drivers, including type 3 vehicles, which are passenger cars, station wagons, and type 1A vehicles, which are the activity buses. So we have a number of coaches, co-curricular directors who use those vehicles on a regular basis, and those folks are identified and provided with training. So it's a practice we have in place already. This is just a matter of adding policy around that practice, and specifies that bus drivers cannot use cell phones while they are driving. Those are the highlights. Any questions?
No, very long policy. Any questions?
Steve, the bus drivers had mentioned a previous concern about first aid training, and you had mentioned that's scheduled for them to be able to take this year.
Yes, that happened.
Wonderful. Okay, it already happened. Wonderful. And then there's another item here about bodily fluids cleanup. They've also had training on how to do that.
They have had training on how to do that.
Wonderful. Okay. There you go.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Moving on to item 5, adoption of policy 514, which is the bullying prohibition.
This is the policy required by state law. This is the MSBA model. I've heard no input since first reading last month.
I would just like to,
Before we discuss, we should move it.
Second, yes.
I'll second that.
I just wanted to, maybe Steve raised some concerns. Some people were worried about, us using the iPads for monitoring kids, anything like that. If you could maybe kind of relay the concerns that's, or how that would be done, how cyberbullying would be monitored.
Right. Well, we use an internet content filter, which would screen out certain websites and some traffic. Most of cyberbullying is reported. So either another student or a parent would report it, or perhaps a staff member would observe it.
Okay, so the community has nothing to worry about of the school, watching them on the iPads or...
In class, so for example, a teacher would walk around and
Sure.
look over the shoulders and things like that, but we don't have the ability to monitor at home.
Okay, thank you, that's wonderful. I do have one question, actually,
I would think though that with that, any content that's on the internet that is brought to our attention would be investigated.
Absolutely.
I mean,
it's brought to our attention.
again, I don't see us proactively looking at the content that's either being put up or looking at people's stuff, other than when it's brought to our attention.
Yep, I just wanted to kind of clarify that. The other item that I just wanted a bit of clarification on was we had identified in here that looking at number 3 definitions, and I'm looking at letter D, number 3.
What page are you on?
I'm sorry, I am on 514.4.
Okay.
Toward the top of the page, actually more toward the middle of the page, and it identifies different reasons that bullying could occur. My concern is that those reasons might get more credence if somebody's being bullied for those reasons as opposed to general bullying, or are they just being spelled out?
So which, are you under letter C?
Letter D, number 3, is directed at any students based on a actual perceived.
What section? What we're in bullying?
Number 3 definitions, letter D,
Okay, yeah.
number 3. Or Roman numeral 3, I should say. Definitions.
Page 5.
514.4.
Yeah, page 72 would be back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, that's okay.
I'm
Number
kind of
3,
old school and I like
okay.
to print everything out and use my highlighter, sorry.
That's fine.
No, wasting trees.
So is if your question is, does the policy limit bullying to those specific issues?
No.
The answer is no. These are just examples.
Right, my concern was if something under here would, I guess what I'm wondering is, I mean, bullying is bullying, and, you know, why are we listing out different identifiers?
I think based on the state law and then the legal counsel that developed the policy, thought that it would be especially important to list out specific items, but certainly there's an endless list of
Sure,
types of bullying.
okay.
And if you look at the end of that sentence even, however, prohibited contact need not be based on any characteristic defined.
Right,
So,
that's why I'm wondering why you listed.
I'm trying to give examples.
Okay.
So Sherry, if I understand,
Opposed to it, and just, yes.
if I understand what you're saying correctly, why would we list anything?
Right.
Just saying that we
We're
will not
against
allow,
period.
we will deal with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I guess that's, because to me, it almost seems like we're getting more credence if bullying's done under these conditions as opposed to, you know, general bullying of a white male student that doesn't meet those conditions. And my thought is, bullying is bullying, and why would we list these out unless it's to give some sort of,
I think it's clarification for identification purpose, so that people understand that anything related to these is considered bullying. Teasing or whatever related to any of these fields is considered bullying.
you know, and it is what it is. I mean, to me, it almost seems like, you know, okay, if you're teasing somebody for something else, it doesn't quite carry the validity.
Well, if you look up under letter A, it's a more general definition.
Yeah,
And then B goes into cyberbullying, and then D goes in, or the one you're talking about, E goes into the Minnesota Human Rights Act.
I understand that.
I think they're just trying to cover everything.
Okay.
Good question. Any further discussion on policy 514? Okay. The motion before us is to accept policy 514 as written, and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That moves on to number 6, governance education. That's the ordinance below.
Want me to grab it?
I can grab them back here.
Ryan, can you get this one? There you go, thank you. Okay, so this is our annual board governance, professional development. And by the survey that we completed, we wanted to look at both policy governance and school board superintendent relationship. So we'll spend about 10-15 minutes visiting about this, and then we'll have some question and answer at the end. Policy governance was developed by John Carver probably 20 to 25 years ago, and it's in a book called Boards That Make a Difference. It's his initial book that he wrote, and it's been widely adopted by governing bodies, mostly by public governing bodies. And it's growing in terms of the number of schools that are using it in Minnesota. There are not a lot of school boards that are using policy governance. Policy governance is all about seeing to it that the organization achieves what it's supposed to achieve and avoids unacceptable situations. So policy governance ensures that the board acts on behalf of the owners, achieves what it should achieve, while avoiding situations that should be avoided. Policy governance is a complete system of strategic leadership. It does include accountability, and it requires discipline, both on the part of board members, on the board as a whole, and on the superintendent. Policy governance is an alternative to micromanagement. So in micromanagement, the school board is involved with things like the lunch menus, student discipline, playground rules, teacher evaluations, the number of minutes between classes. And policy governance broadens the scope and focuses the school board on strategic leadership. I think everybody would agree that strategic planning is important to an organization. It's definitely important to public schools. And if you stop and think about it, if it's important, who is it assigned to? There's no job description within the school district that includes strategic planning. So that job is left to the school board. And under policy governance, the school board takes primary responsibility for strategic planning. As you know, in policy governance, the board is planning anywhere from 10 to 18 months in advance. As a policy governance board, you know that you're continuously in the process of seeking input from stakeholders, creating strategic plans, writing policies, turning those plans over to the administration for implementation, and then starting the cycle again. The policy governance model has the advantage of being flexible in that it's planning about 18 months ahead, and it also has the advantage of being able to incorporate long-term goals, like our 10-year fund balance policy. So it's both flexible and affords for long-term planning. Policy governance is a move from details into vision and goal, a move from reactive to proactive, a move from how will we get there to where are we supposed to go. From how to where, or you could think of it from how to what. So it gets the board out of the how business and into what. What's the end? What's the goal that we're after? There's 10 principles to policy governance. The first one is ownership. The board exists to act as the informed voice and agent of the owners. All owners are stakeholders, not all stakeholders are owners. So who are the owners of a school district?
The public.
The public. Who are the stakeholders?
Students, teachers.
Students, teachers, staff.
Yep.
Yep. Aaron, exactly, right. So that's principle one, is ownership. Principle two, the position of the board. The board is accountable to owners. How are we doing on that one? Are we accountable to the owners for the success of the organization? The goals we went through tonight, right? That's AMS or AMS policies, and we reported those out a couple times now this year, so yes, I think we're doing that. Board holism. The authority of the board is held as a body. The board speaks with one voice. Individual board members have no authority. How are we doing with that one? Yeah, I think so too. AMS policies. The board defines in writing its expectation about intended results to be achieved. How would you assess that one? Yep, those are our goals. Yeah. Policy 223, we'll look at that later. Governance process policies. We don't look at these probably as often as we should, but we do have a series of policies around how we're going to conduct ourselves as a board. So we do have that in place.
Do you think we should, just, if we could, is this okay to,
Oh, yeah.
I'm just wondering, you made the comment that we don't look at that often enough. Why don't we make that part of the agenda going forward? I don't know how many there are, but if we could review those on a regular basis, I think it might help us all.
You don't want to go wrong, right?
I don't, no, I'm.
Good reading material.
You do?
Get your highlighter out.
I'm going to touch on them tonight, so
Great.
you'll at least know what number they are. And number 6 is the executive limitations. Now, under policy governance, the board doesn't tell the CEO or the superintendent how to go about accomplishing the goals. The board tells the superintendent how not to accomplish the goals. So they're called limitations or boundaries. In the last sentence there, the board describes those means that would be acceptable even if they were to work. So in this case, the end does not justify the means. There's certain ethical and professional and legal boundaries that have to be met as the superintendent is achieving those means, those ends. Policy sizes, under policy governance, the board works first in the most broadest policies and sets that up, and then continues to set policy to the level of detail at which it's willing to accept any reasonable interpretation by the CEO. An example of a very detailed policy is the transportation policy that we just looked at tonight. That's telling bus drivers exactly what to do, exactly how to perform their maintenance. So that's an example of a very detailed policy. And it's not that you don't necessarily trust the bus drivers, but much of that happens to be regulated by state law. Clarity and coherence of delegation. Those subparts of the board, such as committees, will be given jobs that duplicate or obscure the job given to the CEO. How do we do that? I think you're doing great.
We go through you for what questions we have. That's rather than asking those questions.
Right, we don't have committees writing memos to teachers and taking over that administrative role. I think the board has done a good job of keeping that separation. Any reasonable interpretation. After ends policy governance process, executive limitation policies are established. The CEO has the right to use any reasonable interpretation of applicable board policies. This one could be hard because we all have our own way of doing things, and maybe the way that it was done wasn't the way that the board or a board member might like to see it done. So this one can be a challenge at times.
But again, I don't think that we interfered much in that, and when we saw a need to change a policy, we changed it at the correct policy level. We didn't get involved with the specific situation.
I would agree. I forgot to ask you how you're doing with that one, and I think you're doing well.
Well, and I think a good example of that is the calendar we just approved in June. Is, we need to set a calendar, we never told you what not to do, or what not to include. And then you were allowed to go by and get accounted for it. And, I mean, the ends were what you thought was acceptable and brought it to us. So I think it's a good example of what that's. What? And it passed.
Yep, and we talked about policy. It wasn't unanimous,
Right.
but it didn't pass.
Met the criteria set out by the board. Yep, that one can be challenging. Monitoring, do we monitor organizational performance against our end policies? Sure we do. That's policy 223, the board goals. That's what you approve every December. And then in the summer, we always check back on those. And in pure policy governance, that would be the superintendent's evaluation, is simply the achievement of those goals. And MSBA has come up with a updated superintendent evaluation policy that does exactly that. Might be something we want to visit about at some point in the future. There's 4 policy categories under policy governance: ends, executive limitations, board CEO relations, and operational governance, or how the board does its business. And our policies, you can see categorized right here. I thought we'd just touch on each of them. Our ends policy, or the goals, is 223. So 223, and we can see this was approved last December and the December before that. And here it says the strategic goals are established for the 14-15 school year. And we just looked at these about a half hour ago. And there they are in board policy. Around core academic standards, around the MCA proficiency, exit outcomes for ELOs at the modification and redefinition level, and the financial integrity of the district with the fund balance policy. The next set of goals are around executive limitations, and the first one there is 302. So we're looking for executive limitations. We come down here. Paragraph E, if you can read that. The superintendent shall not cause or allow any practice, activity, decision, or organizational circumstance which is either unlawful, imprudent, or in violation of commonly accepted educational, business, and professional ethics and practices. That's one of our executive limitation policies. We also have 307, which essentially says the superintendent shall not adjust his or her own compensation and benefits. And then we have 727, asset protection. The superintendent shall not fail to insure against theft and casualty losses to 100% of replacement value. I'll just read a few of these to you. Subject facilities and equipment to improper wear or insufficient maintenance. Unnecessarily expose the organization or the board to claims of liability. Fail to use intellectual property, information, and files from loss of significant damage. Receive, process, or disperse funds under controls which are insufficient to meet the standards of the auditor appointed by the school board. Invest or hold operating capital in insecure instruments, including uninsured checking or savings accounts. So those are our executive limitation policies. Then our board CEO relations. The first one is 222. policy distinguishes the role of the school board from the role of the superintendent. The board is to represent the citizens and lead the district. The superintendent is the CEO of the school district. The board's direction and operation of the organization will be through the superintendent, who functions as CEO. Only decisions of the board acting at due notice of a public meeting are binding on the superintendent. The board will not evaluate any staff other than the superintendent. Our other policies, policy there is 217, delegation to the superintendent. The school board will develop broad strategic goals that direct the superintendent to achieve defined results within the approved budget. The superintendent will use reasonable interpretation of board policies to make decisions. And the board may change the latitude of choice given to the superintendent at any time. Again, I'm not reading these word for word, just kind of, you've seen them before, pointing them out, and
Through policy, not.
Right.
Yep.
yes.
Good point.
And then the operating or the governing process that Brian suggested we review every so often. First one is 220, board's job description. The job of the board is to represent the citizens and taxpayers and lead the school district by determining and requiring appropriate and excellent organizational performance. To distinguish the board's job description from the job description of the superintendent and staff, the following duties are established as the primary job description of the board. The school board will consider overall goals for the school district to determine what good, for whom, and at what cost. And you'll hear that a lot with charter governance, those three questions: what good, for whom, and at what cost. H? I think we have that one covered. The school board will regularly participate in governance education to improve its own process. And J, the school board will ensure the strategic goals are the focus of the organizational performance. And we'll just look at one more, the agenda plan 218. To accomplish its stated objectives, the board will follow an annual agenda, which includes continuing review, monitoring, and refinement of strategic goals and policies. We do that. Input meetings with various community and school groups. We do that. Monitoring policies and activities to improve board performance through education and enriched input and deliberation. That's part of what we're doing tonight. And then, as you know, the planning cycle begins in January, and it concludes in December, and then the board goals are turned over to the administration in December for implementation the following fall. C, the consent agenda shall include all items delegated to the superintendent or required by law or contract to be board approved. The board will attend to consent agenda items as expeditiously as possible. An item will be removed from the consent agenda for independent consideration on the request of an individual school board member. And an annual cumulative evaluation of the superintendent will be conducted and include a review of the school board's strategic goals. So we're doing that. So those are our policies by category. And kind of moving towards summary here, the work of the school board then is to develop a vision for the school district, to set goals and monitor progress, establish school board policy, hire, direct, and evaluate the superintendent. The work of the superintendent is to implement the board's vision for the district, achieve goals and report progress, implement school district policy, and serve as CEO of district operations. Just want to talk a little bit about communication. because I think that is an important part. Yep. That's an important part as we talk about the board superintendent relations. Of course, communications are a two-way street. And somebody that has something to communicate, it's incumbent upon them to bring that issue up in a timely fashion or ask the question. And then it's incumbent upon the other person to listen and understand what the individual is saying. So ongoing communication between the board and the superintendent is critical. I think that many understandings come from the fact that information is missing. So when all the facts are on the table, most people come to the same conclusion. And as we're communicating, that often resolves many issues. Just by getting all the facts out, oh, I didn't realize this and this, and by getting all the information out, most communication is successful. And then I think another covenant for successful school board superintendent relations is no surprises. We all might like a surprise birthday present or something like that, but few board members like to be surprised in the public with information about the school they didn't know, or talking to a staff member and getting surprise information that they didn't know. So it's the superintendent's responsibility to keep the board informed. And at meetings like we're at tonight, neither the superintendent or school board members appreciate being surprised. So it's a mutual responsibility, again, going back to communication, that we keep those lines open and we avoid surprises. That's what I have in terms of PowerPoint.
Just to talk about that,
Yeah.
one of the things that comes to my mind a lot of times is that people then will avoid giving you the bad information. You know, if you're saying that I don't want any surprises, that means that I'm not gonna bring it up because that would be a surprise if they will. I think more what we're saying is proactively communicate and ask questions. So for instance, you know, earlier today I texted you and asked a question about what about last year's goals, and we report on those. And you added those to the board packet so we can talk about them here. Being proactive and putting that information out front. But if, I want to be clear that if there's bad news out there, we don't want to be surprised that that's somewhere down the line. We want to hear about that up front.
Absolutely. We don't want to sweep anything under the carpet. If there's an issue or something that's gone wrong, we want to address it. But we want to address it through proper channels and in a respectful way. I think I know what you're saying. Absolutely.
I will say, Steve, that, you know, I certainly don't always have the happiest sometimes things that I bring forward, but you always listen to them, you always do it in a respectful manner, and I appreciate that.
Thanks, Sherry.
Well, I guess adding to that comment, Sherry, Aaron, you brought up the calendar question that we struggled with a little bit. And, as I looked through the board packet in preparation for the meeting, there was a section in there about it is perfectly fine to disagree. Okay? And as I looked at that article that was put in there, and we see those variety of topics, I think it's really important that we are free to express those ideas at the table. And at some point, we have to make decisions, we do. And at that point, we may not have agreed with the decision. However, we have to act as one.
Right,
One
and
unit.
respect the outcome of whatever
Right.
is decided. You bet, and I appreciate the fact that sometimes I may not always have the popular opinion of the day, but that I listen to, and I never walk away from here feeling that, you know, frustrated or upset that nobody heard me or anything like that. So I really do, I appreciate all of that.
That's good.
Good discussion. I'm a big believer in getting ideas on one page, even if it takes a legal sheet to do it. So this is just a summary of everything I talked about. And if you look down toward the bottom, number 4 and 5, just want to take a couple more minutes before we wrap up. You can see the possible benefits of policy governance, and 5 is the possible difficulties. And as you read through number 4, what do you think? What have been some of the benefits for us of policy governance?
Focus on the big picture. I think that's helpful because sometimes I think can be a little bit easy to get mired in the details of something, and that really isn't what we're here for. And we refocus and say, you know what, this is the outcome we want, and we need to trust that you're going to achieve that outcome. I think that's something that's helpful.
Personally, I look at 4I, clearly articulated goals. You know, we get approached by members, whether stakeholders or district residents, about certain issues. There's, with that focus on policy governance, to be able to say, okay, I heard what you have to say, and you need to follow chain of command. I'm not going to get involved to that level. Make sure you work through the proper channels. However, I will voice this to Dr. Murray. And so he's aware of it, so there aren't any surprises. I think that really does help us function better.
I think letter F is a benefit because coming on the board 3.5 years ago, there was very little direction or policies that defined what the board was supposed to do or what our goals were. And I think as we move forward, we're doing a good job of laying those down so new board members in the future be able to walk on and be like, okay, I understand this is what's going on and this is the policy that frames it.
Okay, so I'll be on.
With G, Illinois Combined
Okay.
that has the policies. The policies are written down, they're available. You were pulling them straight off of our website. So they're available everywhere.
Let's look at number 5, the challenges of policy governance. What have you seen as challenges?
I think sometimes that we can get caught up in that anything controversial is board work when it really isn't. There are many things that are administrative, and it sometimes is a good reminder to leave it up to the administration because they are perfectly competent and capable of handling it. We really don't need to get involved with all of those things, and that can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge as a board member defining where that line is.
And some of that is inherent in the school district. For example, a few years ago when we changed activity conferences, technically that would be an administrative decision, but because it's a high-profile decision with a lot of emotion around it, it just ends up coming to the board. So some of that's unavoidable, but I think it's appropriate.
I think the letter B was, I think it's getting better, but I think when we first moved to policy governance, that letter B, failing to understand CEO can make decisions as long as it's within the means. That may not be what I was thinking, but the end, the same results we're looking for, we did with your work. I think that's I think it's getting better as the years go on, but I think that's one of the hard ones is, well, that's not what I was thinking about, but it doesn't qualify.
Sorry. I think that's not really listed here. The challenges I've been over just from discussion with people. So I don't think people, because we're well aligned by the time we come to the table, I don't think people understand that we do challenge you. You don't get challenged openly, the no surprise rule, but the amount of questions we send your way, and so I think there's a lot of misperception that we just accept everything Dr. Mullen says, and frankly, that could be farther from the truth as much as we like it. I'm actually interested to hear what your perception is. You brought policy governance to Becker, so what's your perception?
I think it's been successful. As Aaron mentioned, from 2009, 2010, there was just not a lot of clarity around roles, there was not a lot of focus around who's supposed to be doing what. And I think policy governance has brought that to the school district. I think we are focused on policies, we're focused on strategic planning, and we've identified those roles, and I think it's been a positive.
I would like to back up a little bit to number 2, the monitoring. I think we do pretty good with A and B. Challenge to all of us might be, is there places we should be looking at? Direct inspection, there's some places we should be looking or not. It's just an open-ended question for everybody. I think one of the things we teach new supervisors in my business is you get what you inspect. So not what you expect, what you inspect. So I'm not in any way saying we need to be in classrooms or directly interviewing people or anything like that, but there's places where we should be looking for opportunities. I mean, we'll do one here, is that, when we building tour, that kind of stuff is great.
Any last comments before we wrap up? Well, I hope you found this beneficial. And the other thing you had asked for is financial training in school finance. And Joe, we have that planned for October, I think. Yeah. So we'll have that coming up in a couple months. Appreciate your attention.
Thank you, Dr.
We
Muller.
get our audits done, man.
We don't want to have it all the same thing.
At this time, we'll be moving on to item number 6 on the agenda. Item number 7, a tour of the facilities. Is Joshua staying here for that?
Yeah.
Okay. So we will be going on a tour of the facilities. For those of you in the audience, after that, we will be heading into closed session. After closed session, we'll be coming back to adjourn the meeting, so there will be no business at the table other than coming back for